My name is Nadia Belrose, and I am 33 years old. The moment my divorce was finalized, I stood on the courthouse steps in the cold morning air, still wearing my mother's old pearl earrings for luck, and I called my father with only one sentence ready on my tongue: freeze every account tied to Thorne Import Logistics, effective this second. He didn't ask why. He just asked how fast I needed it done. And that single question told me everything about the 6 years I had spent protecting people who never deserved it. My father, Elias Belrose, built Belrose Roastworks out of the back of a delivery van in 1991, driving bags of green, coffee beans up and down the coast, before most people in this country had ever heard the word single origin. By the time I turned 28, it had grown into one of the largest specialty coffee importers on the East Coast, and he handed me 30% ownership with a warning I never forgot. He told me the company would only ever be as strong as the people I let stand next to it. I married Marcus Thorne 7 years ago, and within a year, his family's fingerprints were already on the business. It started with his mother, Corinne Thorne, mentioning at a birthday dinner that her nephew had just finished a logistics degree and was struggling to find work. Then it was a cousin who understood importing regulations. Then an old family friend who could, quote, streamline our overseas contracts. One by one, 22 people connected to the Thorne family filled positions across purchasing, quality control, and international freight. My father trusted my judgment completely. He never once questioned why so many of my recommendations. Shared a last name with my husband's side of the family, and that trust is exactly what let it happen right under both of our noses. For years, everything looked fine on paper. Then the numbers started doing something strange. A quality control fee here that didn't match any actual shipment. A plantation contract in Colombia that had somehow doubled in price with no change in the beans themselves. I asked Marcus about it once, gently, over dinner, and he told me I was overthinking spreadsheets again, that his family had only ever tried to help. When I brought it up a second time months later, his voice went cold in a way I had never heard before, and he asked me why I couldn't just be grateful. That question sat in my chest for weeks, but I wasn't done asking mine. So I did something I never told a single person, not even my father. I hired a forensic auditor named Priya, and I paid her out of my own personal savings, meeting her at a diner 2 towns over, so no one from the office would ever recognize us together. What she uncovered over the following 10 months made my hands go cold the first time I read it. 22 employees, all connected by blood or marriage to Corinne Thorne, had built an invisible second business inside my father's company. And the deeper Priya dug, the more I realized this wasn't sloppy family favoritism. It was a machine built slowly, on purpose, over years. The plantation in Colombia we had supposedly been sourcing exclusive microlot beans from for the past 4 years did not exist. It was a shell company registered under Corinne's maiden name, funneling money through inflated freight invoices and phantom quality inspections. That never happened. Nearly $3.2 million had quietly disappeared over 5 years. Dressed up as premium sourcing costs my father approved without blinking, because why would he ever doubt his own daughter's husband's family? I sat in my car outside that diner for almost an hour after Priya showed me the final report, staring at a number that represented everything my father had built and everything Marcus's family had been quietly stealing from underneath him. I didn't confront Marcus with any of it. Not yet. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I filed for divorce quietly, citing irreconcilable differences, and I let the forensic report sit sealed in my lawyer's safe until the ink on my final decree was completely dry. People might call that cold. I call it strategy. Because the second I was legally free of the Thorne name, free of every obligation that made his family believe they were untouchable, I could finally move without a single ounce of guilt holding me back. And that morning, standing on those courthouse steps, I finally moved. Within 20 minutes of my call, our head of operations had a full list of names in front of him. Within 2 hours, security was walking each one of those 22 employees out of the building, one at a time, boxes in hand, no explanation given beyond effective immediately. My father called me that afternoon, his voice quieter than I had ever heard it, and asked only one question. Send me everything. I did. All 10 months of it, every invoice, every shell contract, every wire transfer to a plantation that had never grown a single coffee cherry in its life. That evening, while I was still unpacking boxes in the small rental house I had moved into during the separation, I heard someone pounding on my front door hard enough to rattle the frame. It was Corinne Thorne, and in 7 years of forced holiday smiles, I had never once heard her raise her voice the way she raised it that night. She screamed at me the second the door opened, demanding I reverse every termination immediately, telling me I had absolutely no idea what I had just done to her family. I stood in that doorway and felt something I hadn't felt in years around her, calm. I told her she needed to leave my property. She laughed, sharp and bitter, and told me the Thornes had built half of what my father proudly called his life's work. She told me those 22 people had families depending on those paychecks. Families I was now starving out of pure spite. I told her the only thing that had been starved for the last 5 years was my father's company, slowly, deliberately, and that the forensic report sitting in my lawyer's office could prove every single dollar of it in front of a judge if she wanted to test me. Her face changed, just slightly, a flicker under all that fury. And I knew right then she understood I wasn't bluffing anymore. She tried a different approach almost instantly, softening her voice, telling me Marcus still loved me, that all of this could be undone, that I could reinstate the employees and let the family move forward together. I almost admired how quickly she pivoted from threats to false warmth. I told her there was no version of this where anything got undone, and that if she wanted to fight it, my legal team would be thrilled to make the forensic report part of the public record. That was the moment her threats turned into promises of lawsuits. I simply closed the door. The weeks after that were harder than I expected. Not because I doubted anything I had done, but because rebuilding an entire department from nothing takes time. My father brought in a sharp new operations director to oversee purchasing and freight while we vetted every single new hire personally. Within a month, shipment delays that had quietly plagued us for years disappeared completely. Sourcing costs that had mysteriously crept upward every quarter dropped by nearly 20% almost overnight. Once the shell contracts were gone and replaced with real, competitively priced growers, Marcus called me exactly once. 3 weeks after his mother showed up at my door, his voice smaller than I had ever heard it. He didn't defend her. He didn't defend a single name on that list. He just asked how I was doing. And for one strange moment, the version of him I had actually married flickered through the version his mother had spent years constructing. I told him I was doing better than I had in years. I meant every word. He never called again. The lawsuit Corinne promised never came. Once her own attorney reviewed the forensic report during discovery, he quietly advised her that pushing any further would only invite a criminal fraud referral. The threats stopped as suddenly as they had started. 2 of her closest relatives left the state within 2 months, and the shell plantation company was dissolved before the year was even over, presumably to bury the paper trail before anyone looked too closely. My father never pursued criminal charges. He told me watching them lose everything they had built on stolen ground was punishment enough, and that dragging our family name through headlines wouldn't undo a single dollar. Part of me wanted more, but I understood him completely. 6 months later, Belrose Roastworks posted the strongest quarter in the company's entire history, staffed for the first time in years by people who had earned every position on merit instead of bloodline. That spring, my father stood in front of the very warehouse where he had started the company decades earlier, and in front of every employee gathered there, he named me president. I stood there in the same coat I had worn on the courthouse steps the day everything changed. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like my life and my father's company finally completely belonged to me.